Hey guys, I'm Dave with the Troll Gallery, and today we're going to make a short stand for my laser level. I have a job coming up that I need to use my laser to give me a line about 12 inches off the floor. And while I have two tripods, they're both way too tall for that. Using materials I had in the shop, I came up with a simple solution that's easy to work with too. Let's see how it came together.
I started with a scrap of 3/4 inch birch plywood that was about 16 inches long. I took that over to the table saw and ripped it down to several 3-inch wide strips. I did some layout work and found the center of two of the strips and set up my drill press and fence. I chucked up a 7/16 Forstner bit and drilled most of the way through the first piece. I drilled from both sides hoping to end up with a clean hole. Sadly, this plywood wasn't cooperating and I still got a little blowout, but I'm making a tool, so it doesn't need to be that pretty. While I had this all set up, I drilled the same size hole in a second strip, this time about 1.5 inches in from the end. Switching over to a 2-inch hole saw, I drilled a through hole in a third strip of plywood, again centered on the piece. I set my depth stop so the pilot bit would penetrate the far side, but not the hole saw. Then I could flip the stock and get a clean hole on both sides. One last hole while I'm at the drill press, this time using a 9/32 brad point bit. This was on the strip with a 7/16 hole and about 5 inches away from that. This smaller one is a clearance hole for a 1/4 machine screw, so to finish it off I swapped out the brad point bit with a taper bit and countersunk an area for the screw head. At the miter saw, I cut two 3-inch long feet from another of the strips of plywood that I had cut earlier. I also cut the strip with the two holes to about 6.5 inches long. And if you haven't figured out by now, none of these measurements were super critical, except for the clearance hole diameters. Now it's time for assembly. If I knew all this would work, I might glue things together. But for now, I'll just pin and screw them in case I need to make changes later. A few 23 gauge pin nails to hold the two cross strips in place, then I can secure them with some number 6 by 1.25 inch screws. The feet were added the same way. They were pinned, drilled, and screwed with no glue, at least not for now. I just made sure that the feet were in the correct position. The cross piece with the large hole goes on the bottom, so the feet went on the other strip for additional support. A little sanding to clean up any fuzz from the drilling or screws will prevent the stand from scuffing the floor that I'm going to be using the stand on first. Things should start to make sense now. I thread a nut onto a section of 1/2 inch threaded rod, making sure to have at least 1.75 inches of the rod exposed. Then I added a washer and slid the rod through the base of the stand from above. I can now add a second washer and nut from below, threading it up until the nut is even with the base of the threaded rod. The nut and the washer are just under 3/4 inch thick, so the large clearance hole will prevent the nut and rod from touching the floor later. Now I can tighten the two nuts, ensuring that the bottom nut stays even with the end of the rod. And this secures the rod to the stand base. I knew looking at the blown out plywood on the mount would drive me nuts, so I drilled another countersink on the other side, giving me a clean top face on the mount. I ran the machine screw through the plywood mount, added a washer and a nut to hold things in place. The screw I had on hand was a bit too long, so I added a second nut just to take up some of the excess threads. To add the mount to the stand, I needed to thread another nut onto the threaded rod and then drop a washer on top of that. Now I could add the mount to the threaded rod. The mount sat at a bit of an angle, but I was hoping that tilt was slight enough that my laser would correct for it. The only way to find out was to thread the laser onto the 1/4 post and test it out. When I turned on the laser, I got this: a blinking light, not a solid line. Yep, The mount was too far out of level and I have to go to plan B. Luckily the fix was simple and I added one more washer and a nut to hold the mount snugly in place. With that done, the mount was level and I got a good solid beam. The mount also swivels without changing the height. I think I've got the solution I needed for my job. The stand was finished just in time. I took it to my job site the next day and it worked like a charm. You can see my regular tripod next to the stand I made, and the tripod would have kept the laser line more than a foot higher than I needed. My new stand saved lots of time and frustration, as I would have had to measure down to strike a level line.
As woodworkers or makers or hobbyists, we often run into situations where our existing tools don't work for the job we have on hand. That's when we have to get creative and make something ourselves. Sometimes they're simple, sometimes they're complicated, but almost always more satisfying than buying some gadget online. With this project, I had maybe a couple of hours invested, and I focused on using materials I had here in the shop. And in the end, I came up with something that worked just the way I needed it, and it's small enough that I can stash it away and use it later. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video. Was there something I could have done better, smarter, safer? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear. If you enjoyed this video, maybe give it a thumbs up and share it with friends. And if you haven't already, maybe it's time to hit that subscribe button, the little bell, so you get notified each time I put out a new video. Never real sure what's coming up next. It's usually not what I plan, but I hope you find them interesting. Until then, have a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.